Hello, everybody. My name is Halo. Welcome back to the series where we're dealing with Flutter programming. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a calculator application in Flutter. Now, uh, throughout the series, we'll be talking about simplifying this. So, a lot of the code that you've been seeing in other videos are probably 50, 60 lines. But today, that's not going to be the case. Well, this is a simple application. The code is approximately 330 lines. Now, therefore, we're not going to be doing this video in the other styles that we've been doing for the past videos. We were trying to recreate everything and rewrite everything from scratch. I don't think there's enough time, nor will you guys, understand when we're typing 300 lines of code. Now, the way we're going to be approaching this video is I'm going to be talking through all of these components because a lot of this is kind of repeated. So I'm going to be talking through a lot of that, and hopefully you're able to understand. Now, before I do that, I want to kind of demo what this application is. So you have these buttons right here. So for example, 66 minus 65, I do this, I get the answer 1. So I do into 0, and then it's 0 again. So 85 into 0, second 0. So you get plus, minus, multiplication, and division. Very basic calculator only. Let's see how we're going to be doing this in Flutter. Now, again, 300 lines of code may look a bit overwhelming, but in reality, it's not. Okay. So let's start with the first import, which is material dot dot. This is constant across everything. Now, then we do the void main function, right? And then there we call this home to be page, and that page is actually a stateful widget. Now, it is a stateful widget because in this calculator, there are going to be multiple stages, correct? Now, obviously, when you're running the material app, you can also set the debug show checkered banner to be false if you want to get rid of that debug thing over there. Okay. No, as we're talking about, right, there are multiple states in this application because when I do 58 minus 53, what happens is a new state is created, and that's how this code is, this line is updated, and we get the answer 5. Okay. So it's a stateful widget, as we discussed. Now, here, let's talk about what the string calc is. This string calc is nothing but this line on top, which you see. Okay, that is important because we're going to be doing all our calculations based on this line, and this we are storing into a string. Why do we store into a string? So that we can split that easily with the operand. Okay, so if we do something like 85 with the string, using a string, I can use these string operations to split the string using this multiplication asterisk over here, so that I get the left hand side operand and the right hand side operand, and I can find out what the operation is also. That's the only reason we're using the the string over here for this variable calc. Okay. Now, all of these functions, before we go into what these are, I'd actually go back into the GUI and then we'll come back to this. Don't worry. And obviously, all of this is constant stuff. We're returning a scaffold with an app parsing calculator. All of this is standard stuff. Then we have a column. A column because we need multiple widgets, correct? And we're also going to be using another thing called row over here. Okay, row is also a widget where you can put multiple. So in column, you'll do everything vertically. In row, you can do that horizontally. Basically, you can do multiple widgets horizontally, and that's why we're going to be using a row also. So a column with a lot of children, right? We've put a container over here, and this container is nothing but this line over here. Okay. This container will simply display the text that is the calc variable that we discussed before. Okay. Then let's move on. It's a sized box so that we have some space between this line and the next line. Then this is where the row comes in. Okay. The row works very similar to how column does, except in row, you're going to have the children. That is going to be horizontal. Okay. So that's what we're doing here. We're creating elevated buttons for each of these numbers over here, correct? And then we're binding that to a function. So this is the elevated button for the number 1. The text will be 1, but on press, it calls the press 1 function. Now, that is the same thing we're going to be doing from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. Okay. And in between all of these rows, we also have a sized box so that all 3 and the new row, 3 and the new row, we have some sized box in between so that there's some gap over there. Now, what all of these functions do, it's very simple. Since calc is a string, we can concatenate to string by doing string addition, right? So we create functions where, for example, press 7 is a function, right? So all it will do is it'll set a state where it adds 7 to the calc string. That's it. That goes till 1 to 9 and then 0 also. I hope that makes sense. It's the same function except in every case, regarding on what button you're pressing, it'll add that number to the string. Okay, so we're able to add something to the string similar to this, and that works the same with this plus into division and then minus also. That's where this operand. So for example, press M is press multiplication, where we add this asterisk. Okay, and that's how that works. And obviously, the only thing that'll be different here is this equals button. and show you that also in a bit. Give me a second. So this equals button actually calls a function called calculate, and this is very important because up till here, if you're able to understand, maybe I'll go over the style also. So you have an elevated button. The style is background color is yellow and the foreground color is black. And I've also chosen white with orange for all these other numbers. Okay. So let's deal with the calculate function now. If you're able to understand everything, then now great. Now OP, that is a string. Okay. And this string is actually something that we're not going to be using, I think. The value of, yeah, we can actually remove this one also. Now, that what the approach was before was I was assigning all this calc to a different variable and calculating from there, but that's not really needed. What we're doing here is, first of all, we're checking what operand is there in this calc string, and this string is what you see over top. In this case, when I click the equals button, what happens is it checks whether this into is there, this asterisk is there in my string. And once it does, it creates a new list called answer and splits it based on this asterisk. Now, what happens when you split a string? It splits into two parts, right? So if I'm able to do that, and this is the line I'm giving it to the calculator and pressing the equals, what I will get as two elements, one will be 58,556 and the second element will be 85, right? Plus I know what to do here because already this condition is going through, therefore I know that there's an asterisk inside. Okay, therefore I know what A is, what B is, and I also know what operation I'm going to do here. Therefore I can go ahead and calculate the result. Now, before we calculate the result, we need to convert the string, because the string, and we split the string, it's going to be a list of strings, correct? That we need to pass each element into an integer. So therefore, we're passing both of this, then we're calculating and setting the state where we are changing the value of calc to the result. Now, if you press this equals button, you can see that it changes to the result. That's how it is happening. So it's splitting the string into two operands. It's passing those operands into integers, doing the calculation, and then setting that calc string again to the result. Okay, so now let's talk about the remaining two, which is plus and minus. Now you can see something like this. Into 0, give me 0, and then 869 minus 88, and then I can do another plus 74, something like that. Get 855. Now how that works is very simple to what we did over here. It again looks for this plus, splits based on that, does the left and right, and then adds that, and then changes the calc back. Similar to what minus also does. And in case anything else goes, you're just going to be setting the state to 0. And why this is important is, in general, calculators will have this CE button. What will happen is, if we, let's say you have something like this, and you don't want to go through with all of this, you can just click equal to twice, and that will go out for you. Okay. Now, some caveats, some problems with this approach is, number one, I hope you're able to understand what we're doing here. It's very, very simple stuff. If you break it down, what we're doing is we're creating a GUI where it's a column and then we have set of rows. Each of these buttons are bound to their own function, and a lot of those functions do the exact same thing, but for a different number. And then you have the calculator will check what operator is there on that particular string. Based on that, it'll split into operands and then do the operation for you, and then replace that into the result so that you can go ahead and get your answer. Now, some problems with this approach is, since this is a very naive calculator, I say that because if I do something like 58 plus 87 into 0, what do you think will happen? Nothing will happen. I'll tell you why that happens. So what happens here is, first this if conditions comes in, right? So in this if condition, it goes into true. So this into is there, therefore it goes inside. What happens? It splits it, and then it gets 0 and first element. What is the 0th element here? It's 58 plus 87. That's the string, because it's splitting based on this asterisk. Then when it tries to convert this 58 plus 87 into an integer, it's not able to do that. Therefore, having these multiple operators in the same line will not work for our calculator. That's something that you need to keep in mind. There's one more caveat for this also. Maybe I'll set this back so we can work on the second one. So if I have something like 55 divided by 8, let's say it's something like that, right? And then I do an into 0 over here, you see that nothing happens. The reason for that, again, is when I do this, right, when we're trying to pass this as an integer, it's actually not an integer that we're passing here. We're doing 6.875, and that is not being parsed properly before we do this multiplication, because the left hand and the right hand, I think they're not the same data type, and it's not able to parse 6.875 as a string into an integer. That's a problem. Now, apart from these two problems, this serves as a very nice base way in order to demo a calculator in Flutter. So whether you have your lab exam or you're trying to demo this for an exam, I am sure the examiner won't ask you as much as to do multiple operations in a very single line, because I'm again, these are even this very simple implementation has 330 lines, right? So if you want to do more complex stuff, it's going to be more, and that is something that they won't ask you in an exam. But I hope you're able to understand what we're doing here. I hope you're able to understand why this UI is there, how things work, and the very simple logic that we're using to calculate. Now, of course, feel free to add your own complex logic, but for those who can't, or for those who need some sort of guidance, I hope this serves as a template on what is expected from you when you're doing a calculator. Now, the code for this always is in the GitHub repository. Link for that in the description. I hope this video helped you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video. Until then, bye.